Do you understand the authority of God's word? He is tying his promised child to the altar. Let me tell you something. When you trust God and when you surrender your heart to God, God will show you his hand, but you got to surrender your heart. But most of us want to see his hand, but we don't want to give him our heart. But if you give God your heart, he'll show you his hand. And let me show you what happens. He's tying his boy on that altar. Daddy, I don't understand. He says, son, God will provide. Can you see him taking the blade out and his son looking at him eye to eye? Can you imagine this boy looking at his daddy looking in his eyes, and he says, daddy, with tears perhaps falling out of his eyes, said, daddy, I thought you loved me. I don't understand why. What's happening, daddy? He says, son, God will provide. Can you imagine the same boy that heard his daddy say, we're going to the altar to worship, we're going to the mountain to worship, and we'll be back. But daddy, I thought you told him we were coming back. We can't go back if I'm dead, daddy. How are we going to go back if I'm dead, daddy? And he says, son, I told you God will provide. Can you see him getting ready to take his boy's life? And as he gets ready to go down, Abraham, hold your hand over there in the thicket. You'll see a ram. Can you see Abraham? I told you God will provide. He may not come when you think he ought to. Sometime God takes you to the very precipice of trying your faith and wanting to know if you would trust him at his word. And that's what he did. God provided. Then watch this. See, when you hear God's word and you heed God's word, it will affect you. Look at what happens. Peter falls at the feet of Jesus. He says, Lord, get away from me. Not that he's been mean, not that he's been mad. See, when you come into the presence of God like that, and you see the power of God at work like that, he saw God provide for them what they never imagined could have happened. How is it? We are master fishermen. We've been on the water all night. We've had the best bait. We know where to go. We have had our nets in the water and we caught nothing. But the Lord tells us to launch out into the deep. And the moment we launch out into the deep and we drop our nets, so many fish start coming that we have to signal our partners to come and help us. The ships are about to sink and we have to call them. Peter says, Lord, get away from me. Peter says, I'm not even worthy in essence to be in your presence. Let me tell you what happens, beloved. See, when you get that close to God and you see what God will do, it will expose your wretchedness and it will cause you to express your wretchedness. You'll have to just tell God, I'm not even worthy. Now, I know this is not for you in this room because all of you have it together. I know that you're real sanctimonious, you're real saved, you're real sanctified, so you can come in church, you can sit here like God owes you a seat on the pew and like he ought to be happy that you're in the room today because worship couldn't have happened had you not shown up. Well, for people like me who understand that God didn't have to let me come here and God gave me an opportunity to come into his presence, I get like Isaiah did in Isaiah 6. He says, Lord, I am a man of unclean lips and I am around unclean people. He simply said, Lord, I need you to touch my mouth because I'm messed up. Anybody here, you understand when you see God's power at work in your life, God doing what you never imagined he could do. How is it that you walk into this place with your head lifted up in the air, thinking that you're all of that, thinking that God owes you a seat, when in reality, if it were not for the grace of God, God would have exposed you a long time ago, but he's been covering you, he's been keeping you, he's been protecting you, and he keeps on blessing you despite how bad you really are. Don't you walk into this place with your nose turned up, looking down on somebody like you're better than them, when in reality, none of us deserve to be in here, but by the grace of God, we are here. Therefore, God has moved into our life. He has blessed us beyond what we ever imagined. That's why all of us ought to have our hands lifted, saying, Lord, thank you. Thank you for blessing me when I didn't deserve it. Lord, thank you for hearing my prayer when I didn't deserve it. Lord, thank you for getting me out of stuff that I got myself into that you really didn't have to get me out of, but you looked out for me when I didn't deserve it. You looked beyond my faults. You saw my needs and you supplied every one of my needs, and you ought to be like Peter. Lord, get away. I don't deserve to be in your presence.